All right, and we're sitting down now with this special episode of Arrow on the Air to have conversations with each of our editors about the events that have been taking place this semester and what news is meant in the COVID-19 pandemic. First, we're talking with Lucas Irizarry, editor-in-chief of the Southeast Arrow. What's it kind of been like, basically taking on the organization of the Arrow from the leadership standpoint you're in?
It's a little different from when you first start out reporting at the Arrow. Almost everybody starts from the role of a reporter, and you have to worry about a lot of the small stuff. Even when you go to sports editor like I was, there's a lot of small stuff that you have to worry about. And when you move up to editor, it's really strange because you don't end up having to worry about a lot of the same things. Like, I have to look at the big picture a lot more often now. And when I was sports editor, I didn't really have to worry about that. And you do have to manage people when you are sports editor, but now I have to manage more people, each with a bigger task than anybody I've ever had to talk to before. I'm not sure how well trained I was for the position, but I think I've been able to kind of pick up at a good spot, I guess.
Yeah. And so obviously, taking this on from the get-go, from a different standpoint than, any other editor really would have to assume the position from in terms of, the Arrow's general history in terms of doing this during a pandemic. What has the experience been like for you during this pandemic and managing everything?
It is pretty unique, I'm sure, especially from last semester. We got to spend almost the entire year in person, and now we obviously can never almost do that. I think Zach, he set up a pretty good precedent for the Arrow as far as meeting and a plan for producing content virtually, I guess is the right word. So the plan laid out before me really helped out a lot. It is harder when you don't get to actually see people. You don't get to build as good of a connection as you can. Luckily, we still had the paper where we could do that. But I'm sure it's a lot different from anything anybody's ever had to do at this spot.
Right. And so with this semester, on the one hand, it seems like we've got a struggle because things that we would normally cover have been shut down. And managing all the other branches with culture, sports, and general news, that obviously becomes a thing as well that you have to kind of look out for. But on the other hand, it's kind of has been an eventful semester in general, both because we're reporting a lot on the implications of COVID-19, but also because the Arrow's been up to quite a bit this semester as well in terms of, different things going on. So what would you say is kind of, I don't know, a highlight, I guess, in terms of, maybe anything that really comes to mind, 2 or 3 or whatever you got in terms of things that have stood out this semester to you?
I think the 3 election projects we did were definitely the Arrow at its best. I would say that's the best I've seen us ever perform outside of when we went home last semester for the first time. We had to replan almost everything. I think almost they completely went off without a hitch, I would say. The special section, the debate, and the actual election night coverage, they were really well planned, and everybody played their part amazingly. And it doesn't really get much better than that, I think, as far as the Arrow goes. I think it's a lot tougher to do normal coverage, but we stepped up in the aspect of our special projects.
Yeah, and with that, kind of bouncing off of those ideas in terms of also, this I think plays into some of the COVID adjustments as well. But what I also like to talk about innovation and things in the media and in our in our own backyard or in our own newsroom, anything like that. What do you think in terms of the ways that the Arrow has grown this year? What kind of stands out to you there?
I would say actually the most we've grown, I can't really take credit for. I think you can take credit for it, is their Arrow podcast network. That's by far, I think, where the Arrow has improved the most. We didn't really have that, and now you've kind of created that from the ground up. So that's where we really improved the most, I would say.
Oh, I was hoping you'd say that. No, I can't. No, I appreciate that. I really do. But yeah, no, it's an interesting thing to be able to be in on and to work on. So, I appreciate that. What do you think of the what it means? And I'll say this because I think one of the interesting things about the Arrow is that it has had this really long history. But it also seems that the organization, because it gets new people and new blood in these in the newsroom all the time, that it's always in a state, I guess, of becoming and growing and changing and things like that. But what do you think of what it means to be a media organization right now? It's an interesting time, of course, with so many avenues and venues that we can be reporting on. So much happening on a national level, historic moments all around, really. What do you think it means to kind of be the media right now?
I think anybody who's had to report on anything throughout this whole pandemic has really shown great strength and adaptability. It's really the only job that you couldn't fully shut down throughout this thing, because who's going to talk about this stuff if we don't do it? I think anybody who's had to work through this is going to be a lot stronger for it. And it does suck, but I think it's going to help the entire staff in their path going forward. I think they'll have this to talk about, and hopefully they'll use it to their advantage when they're trying to get professional jobs and stuff. It's tough, but I think anybody who's worked through it has really proved themselves on a cosmic scale, I guess you could say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt. Things, just the beginning of careers and such big things to be reported on, such interesting and momentous things. It just kind of makes you wonder what's around the corner in terms of what do we get to report on next.
Yeah.
And so, you have anything else that you wanted to add? I think that about wraps it up for me.
No, I'm just really proud of the staff for working through this. We didn't get any breaks all semester, and it's been tough, but I think everybody's pursued through it pretty well. So,
all right, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm going to be talking too loud, trying to overcome the technical difficulties, and when you get the file out, I'm going to be like yelling.
I won't yell, but it would. Yeah,
that'd be ideal.
All right. I'm good to go, Matt. You good?
Yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome to the special edition of Arrow on the Air. We're talking today with a group of our editors, getting those editors in here corralled in. It's kind of like herding cats at times. But I don't know how our chief editor manages any coordination. That's a
He's
wild
not
thing.
here, so anything goes now.
He delegates herding to others. He doesn't have to herd us.
Yeah. So we've got Matt Wagner, our managing editor. Those are the words. Yeah. And sports editor Clay Harrell here. How are you guys doing today?
Living the dream, man. It's an honor to finally be on this show.
Yeah, it feels good to do a podcast with capable people. No, I'm kidding. To my other podcast.
Wow.
It gets to be a lot of fun. It's just something. And managing with the Arrow Podcast Network and the like, it seems like I've got so much. I podcast so much, but it feels like I'm so very rarely podcasting, if that makes sense. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just a lot that's going on right now.
You just have a bunch of content at the end of the day and you're not sure where it came from.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. We'll start with you, Matt. Just about your experience this semester, what's it kind of been like for you? Taking up the mantle of managing editor and, going through, all the news that is fit to print.
Right. Well, it was sort of a weird transition because this job didn't necessarily exist before or last year, so I didn't get to watch anybody be managing editor. So Brooke Halford did a great job as news editor last year, so I tried to do a lot of the same style and approach that she took. And as far as the other parts of the job, I sort of got to make it up and see what worked and what didn't. And that's really been the best part of it, is seeing what we can improve on as we go. And you don't really know what's going to work until it doesn't. And learning how to react like that has been really important this year. And I've had a great team bringing me content and writing for me, and that's helped a lot.
How about you, Clay? How's this semester been for you, taking off?
So obviously everybody's in a weird spot, but I feel like I might be in the most unique spot because we have no games to cover in sports. So we're just making it up as we go. I tell my team, other editors, when you're listening, Matt, you're here. I've told Matt this. I think sports has been probably the best section just because they don't necessarily, they have to write, but there's nothing to really write about aside from features. So they've really all stepped up and they've made my life a lot easier. They're putting out really good content and it's consistent, and we're still finding a way to come up with 4 and 5 stories a week. And so once spring rolls around, man, we're about to be just it's like a cakewalk almost, I think.
Yeah, I think I've said that you guys are just going through the phone book now for features. So you're featuring everybody, and that's really great training for those writers. That's so important in the sports writing field.
Yeah, and now once we get into interviews like after games and stuff, you kind of have to improvise a bit more. But now that they have this feature experience, I think we'll be in a good spot.
Right, because I think with sports writers, you only have so many, and you have a lot of games to cover when sports is going full fledged. So having the time to sit to really then focus in on that form of storytelling is really great for that team, and I think it's going to put out a lot of great content in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, on your side, how has COVID affected you all in terms of just writing events and things, like along those lines? It seems like last semester, of course, it was caught us off guard in terms of just everybody being sent back home, things along those lines. But now we took this semester head on, really, in terms of things. So how has this been for you?
Yeah, we kind of had a better idea after the summer of what things are going to be like, and I think the organizations on campus had a better idea that they can still have events and stuff. And I think a big challenge for everybody was learning how to write news during COVID that wasn't necessarily about COVID. Because COVID is now a part of everything. We're doing this podcast now with masks, and everything is different, but that's not always the news, And getting past that and being able to find the story outside of the glaring differences in our lives, looking at the little details, has been a challenge, and it's really made a lot of stories shine this year because of that.
Yeah.
COVID,
man. I don't know. It feels weird at this point, right? It's like you said, Matt. It's almost at the point now where we have to tell the writers not to include it in the story because it's November now. It's been going on since March, so we all know that COVID is at an impact. So I think that's probably been a tough challenge, is making sure the writers realize hey, we get it now. We're still in the middle of this pandemic, and while stuff is slowly starting to go back to normal, it doesn't need to be reiterated due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Just we know it now, so keep it moving.
Yeah, at a certain point, we're a newspaper, and sometimes that's not new. It's not. None of it's new anymore, unless it's a specific story about COVID and things that are changing in that world.
Right, exactly. And with regards to sports, maybe an uneventful semester, but in terms of news and things like that, election coverages and all of those 9 yards, it's been a pretty eventful semester. What are some things that for each of you has kind of stuck out in terms of what has been, what we've been doing this semester?
Our special section leading up to the election was huge and took a lot of person power. It took a lot of work going into that, and we got really great pieces out of it because we all had more time to focus on it. We knew what we were writing weeks in advance. Everybody was able to get really good interviews and tell full, complete, stories, really diving into very specific details that are applicable to our readers in this area. Election night, I wish personally had gone a little different for me, but that's just the way it is when you're trying to do that quick and dirty in the field journalism. Mm-hmm. Sometimes things technologically don't work out.
Yeah.
I guess for sports, I don't have one thing. I do have if I could shout out a couple writers. Oh,
that's not good.
We're peaking hard right now. But like I've had a Roman Holloway who came in, transferred, never really written before. He came in and he's done a really good job. I've put him on some stories, and I kind of feel bad because sometimes like I'll joke with him, like I'll be like, "Hey, what are you doing this week?" He's like, "I got this, this, and this." I'm like, "Look, I'll give you a little bit longer on the deadline." He always steps up, and he's wrote some really good stories. His story about how the fields are maintained, that was a tough story to write. He got a good interview. He got it done. And then Hawks Nest, too. He stepped up on that. Owen Carando's wrote a couple stories for me. And that's just two that have stuck out. Leon's done a really good job. I mean, everybody that's written for me has done a really good job, and they know that. But it's just, I don't know. It's like it's going to be weird now because they set the bar, right? Like, I've seen what they can do. And now when spring rolls around, I've already told them, like, we can't exactly just not take stories because we're going to have event coverages every single day. And so now I'm hoping that they go further. Like they're going to have that opportunity to go further and shine a little bit more now that it's more like, because it's not really planned, right? Like a feature you can kind of get a basis, but like a game you can't plan out like what's going to happen. So they're going to have to improvise more. And I think we're going to continue to show that we're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah. With each kind of group of editors and etc. With each of us, and as things progress, things kind of change. Do you think that? What do you think of how the Arrow's grown this year? Anything notable example wise for you guys?
Matt, you want to go first?
We've got a bunch of good teams, or good people coming into the team that I think are really going to put out great content over the next year and be people to watch for those bigger stories. Other than that, everything that's changed hasn't really been on purpose. It's been, reactionary to the rest of the world. We've gone through a lot of changes. I think they've all pretty much been for the best and under careful examination as we did them. Making sure we're making these changes purposefully, intently, and watching how they turn out.
Yeah, I think another thing, and I don't really know how the communication was last year, but I think we've done a really good job of just communicating as a whole. Like, hey, this has moved you. And like one thing I've noticed is we made a goal, Matt, I think maybe you that kind of had this idea at the start, was we need to speed up editing. And I've had multiple stories that are edited by everybody in like 45 minutes and they're ready for online. Mm-hmm. So I think that's been a pretty big step up from last year. And I think it's like, for something that was a point of focus from the retreat going into now it's November, I think we've done a pretty good job of keeping stories timely by getting them through editing fast.
That was my plan, and unfortunately I think I'm the worst at carrying it out. It's been very beneficial in other sections.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, I think that's about it. Thank you both for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was an honor.
Now we're going to talk with Sophia Davis, culture editor for the Southeast Arrow, and Madison Abernathy, digital editor. How are you two today?
I am good.
Good.
We're going to say good.
Madison?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good. What I wanted to talk with you guys about was just a retrospective of the semester. So, what has this semester been like? You've taken over the reins of the positions that you've gotten into. In a particularly odd time to be a journalist, or maybe an opportunist or an opportune time to be a journalist. So, just kind of your thoughts there as far as the semester has been.
Well, see, that's a really easy question, but it's also a really difficult question. I don't have anything as far as the editorial side goes to compare it to. Mm-hmm. I have only known being the culture editor in a pandemic. I've been the culture writer outside of a pandemic, but editorially this is the only time I've had this position. From the culture side, I would say it's been especially difficult because a lot of the things that usually we would get to see or do or write about during the semester are now live streamed, which is, you can still get content, but it's nothing like the real thing. Or canceled altogether for fear of the pandemic or any kind of restrictions there. I have seen some really great strides in my writers, and I feel like the editorial team here at the Arrow has been pretty fantastic. So it's been interesting. I think it has been an opportune time to be a journalist, and it's really been an area to see some growth all around.
How about you, Madison? With your position, you're the one that connects us with our audience and gets that information out there. How about you during this time in which we've been kind of everything's kind of shook up?
Well, I feel like it's definitely an interesting time, and like if you can make it through the COVID time, then you can make it when COVID's over. I feel like I was a digital editor in high school too, so I kind of do have that comparison of like what it was like before COVID and then what it's like now. But I feel like the fact that I get to see all of the stories before they go out, and just seeing the quality of the stories that are coming out in a time where you don't think the quality would be that good is amazing. And then just seeing how different students have adapted to continue doing videos and audio when like you're kind of scared to get close to people. I feel like that has definitely not hindered them at all. It's added more to their reporting rather than taken away from it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And when you touch on those subjects of ability to reach people and ability to talk to people, of having events necessary, in some regards, we have had a bit of an eventful semester in the effect that the Arrow took on these larger projects to facilitate conversations, get people news about things like the election and so on and so forth. But with that, there's also the fact, that kind of, as far as one side or another of the newsroom itself that kind of falls. So for culture, were there any like large kind of concentrations of basically of where the news kind of fell during a specific time? I know for like we've just kind of gotten out of the election season, things like that, so that falls more along the general news kind of thing. But as far as culture and things kind of continuing,
I would argue that the virus has, I would say, kind of boosted cultural content, because you think about when you're hypothetically locked up in your home for 2 weeks, you are more than likely watching a show on Netflix or maybe reading a book, and in essence you're consuming art. So the storytelling that has gone on as far as the culture section, I would say has been pretty impactful. It's grown because we have all the time in the world to tell our stories now, and there are so many fantastic people to tell stories about. I would say that the virus could kind of be a blessing in disguise, almost. I don't want to downplay any of the awful side effects of that, but definitely gives you the opportunity to kind of reflect on how much you rely on people in a cultural sense, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How have you been managing like eventfulness, Madison? I know that there's a lot to kind of dish out to people in terms of what kind of has been going on with the Arrow.
Well, I've written 2 stories for Sophia now in the culture section about how plays are being done during COVID, and like there are different things people can do, but like what these plays did were completely different. So just seeing like the different creativity that's taken place and the different ideas that people have to make the virus an addition rather than a subtraction from the production is really interesting. But as far as posting stuff, we do go through like very high traffic times of stories coming in, and then we'll have like 2 or 3 weeks where it's just a very big lull. So it's like trying to find that balance of like getting stuff on the website, but then also having stuff to post on social media, and then like just kind of keeping in touch with our audience and making sure that they know we're still there.
Yeah. And as far as this kind of retrospective goes, is there any moments that are particularly like maybe proud of the Arrow for in terms of how things have gone, and anything that shines like as maybe even as particularly memorable? Anything that you kind of, as far as this semester goes?
Oh, absolutely. So one thing I have to bring up, you were there when we were planning the stories that we were going to write, our bigger center spread stories for the year. Mm-hmm. One I am really particularly proud of is the feature that I wrote on the rare book room here at Southeast. I do kind of remember us talking about it, and I was speaking with Matt Wagner, and we were kind of fighting over who was going to write that story. And I was like, well, I'll do it. I love to read. I have my the bag that I carry my notebook and my pens in when I go out to report has the Faulkner. There's a depiction of him on the bag. So when Matt and I were arguing, he was like, well, you have the Faulkner bag. Like, you really have to write the story. And I was like, okay, I've never written a big Sinner Spread story like that before. And it was really kind of nice. Madison came with me and did some video work. Our photographer at the time, Ramon Buck, came and took some photos. And then our design editor, Allie Bremer, also attended. So it was really a village kind of getting that story to be the best that it could be. I'm really, really proud of how it turned out. And I think it showcased just our ability to work as a team and to produce kind of extraordinary content.
Yeah.
That was probably one of the most memorable things for me too, just because I grew up like a big reader. My grandma was a librarian, so I've just had that drilled in me since I was growing up, so that was like the coolest experience. But I would say one of my most memorable was we were at the retreat, and that first special edition cover for our COVID-19 edition, that idea really came from everybody, and we literally brainstormed it. And then when we saw it and we thought it didn't really make sense, like, we had fixes for it so quick, and Allie was really able to convey the idea we wanted and really capture the time we're living in such a quick to understand cover. And that was probably one of my favorite, because that was like our first act of teamwork as a group. And it was just kind of nice because we were all kind of feeding off of each other's ideas and just building on it. So
yeah, one of the other things with any portion of the media and with being a part of that is kind of thinking about the ways and things innovate. Do you have anything that is kind of stuck with you as far as how the Arrow has grown this semester, as far as you guys go, just kind of how we do things, how we build things in terms of getting our messages out there, our stories out there?
Absolutely. I think that we, just to speak outside of my section, have been a pretty sports-oriented organization. So I have to speak to Clay Harrell's innovation, because we did not have sports to speak of this semester. So it was really kind of inspiring to watch him help nurture some of the younger writers in that section to still find stories and speak to athletes and find new content that way. I definitely think that we've had to build and work and be adaptable this semester when it comes to content, as we've stated, because media has been presented to us in a plethora of ways this semester. So we've really had to adapt to how we tell stories and how we get the information we need out to still engage our audience.
What's your Madison?
There's no fighting that Clay's section has had a lot of curveballs thrown at him, because just with COVID and sports and everything, it's been awful. But I kind of feel bad for him, because he's going to have so much to do next semester with all of the sports being pushed in the next semester. But I think we all I think our point of growth was really in our election coverage, because we all gained so many skills from that. Like, Sophia was running the brief section, and they were turning out briefs so quick. I was in charge of social media in my groups. They were pushing stuff out on social media as quick as they could, and the entire just collaborative effort that was there, and then all of the hard work everybody put into it to make it something we were proud of. I feel like that was probably that was a big growth point for a lot of people.
Sure. All right, I believe that pretty much wraps it up for today. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.